back. If the idea of a unity government doesn't have legs, then it's time to think about some other options. Coalitions, a mishmash of smaller parties combining their seats to essentially prop up one of the major ones. If Kadima is chosen to head the government, it's likely to team up with Labour, but also look for Yisrael support. And if Likud is assigned the task, it can count on support from the ultranationalist Shas and the other religious parties, but will also look to Yisrael. As you can see, both cases, Yisrael, led by Avigdor Liberman, is the deciding factor. And so Livni and Netanyahu are now busy trying to entice Liberman into their camps with promises of toppling Hamas once they're in power, as Liberman wants to do. Both have promised him freedom to vote on critical issues and some critical ministries, but Liberman is also under investigation, don't forget this, for serious suspicions of fraud, breach of trust and money laundering. So who can cut the better deal? What can Livni and Netanyahu realistically promise to Avigdor Liberman? And if you give him too much freedom, does it undermine the whole idea of a coalition? Lots more questions to ask our guests in Tel Aviv, Zalman Shoval, in Nazareth, Jamal Zahalka, and also in Tel Aviv is Yohanan Pleshner. Jamal Zahalka, I'll come to you for the start of this half. You said you wouldn't be putting support or recommending to Shimon Peres either Livni or Netanyahu. What happens if someone like Avigdor Liberman comes into the frame, who, as we've just said, is talking about toppling Hamas?
There are chances for Mr. Netanyahu to form what's so-called small right-wing government, but the chances for Livni to form a government without Likud is almost zero. But we have to look at what does it mean that Liberman will be in any government, if it's from the left or from the right wing in Israel. Mr. Liberman is more extreme than Haider, who have been a minister in the Austrian government. And the word boycott the Austrian government when Haider was there. I think that the world should act the same now. The Arab world, all the world, should put sanctions on Israel if Mr. Liberman is in the government. He's fascist, he's racist, and he's a very dangerous man. And I think he's more extreme than Haider. So if, to be fair, there should be sanctions against Israel government if Mr. Liberman is there in the government. I think that if the major parties in Israel wants to keep good relations or normal relations and not to make crisis with the Arab world, with the Palestinians and with the Palestinian citizens of Israel, Mr. Liberman shouldn't be in any government to be formed either by Mr. Netanyahu or by Mrs. Livni.
So perhaps racist, fascist, dangerous. Let me put all that to Zalman Shoval in Tel Aviv. There is a sort of X factor about Avigdor Liberman. Is there not some sort of risk perhaps in going to coalition with Likud and Avigdor Liberman?
Look, first of all, just for the sake of for the historical record, Mr. Liberman and his party were members of the government headed by Ariel Sharon, and was in fact a member of the government headed by Mr. Olmert, in which Tzipi Livni was the foreign minister and deputy prime minister. So it's not a new development. I must admit, I did not like some of the views which Mr. Liberman aired during the election campaign. Whether he means it or not, it's not for me to say, but one thing is clear. Whether we have a government headed by Mr. Netanyahu or theoretically by Mrs. Livni or a national unity government, there will have to be a program, an agreed program. And I have no doubt that that agreed program will not and should not reflect some of the more extreme views of Mr. Liberman.
There was also a right-wing coalition involving Mr. Netanyahu in the late 90s, and he made, as you'll all remember, concessions to the Palestinians and lost some support for that. Do you think that would, if I stay with you, Zalman Shoval, do you think that will still play on Netanyahu's mind?
Well, you know, we met yesterday with the Russian Foreign Minister, Mr. Lavrov, and with an American congressional committee, and we met before with Senator Mitchell. We even met with Mr. Obama before he became president. Mr. Netanyahu has made it very clear, and I want to reiterate that. We are going to continue political negotiations with the Palestinian leadership, not with Hamas. but with the Palestinian Authority. At the same time, we will try to advance other ideas, additional ideas, not instead of the political negotiations, because after all, the Annapolis process has not brought an agreement. So we must see what can be added, what can be changed. This is also the view, for instance, of Mr. Tony Blair, the representative of the quartet. I don't want to speak in place of President Obama, but I think he's open for new ideas, including some of the ideas which have been announced or mentioned by Mr. Netanyahu.
Yohanan Pleshner in Tel Aviv, let me ask you about the idea of Avigdor Liberman and Kadima, because as we know, that would be much more, there'd be much more distance between those two than there would be, say, between Likud and Avigdor Liberman. What can Kadima offer to Avigdor Liberman?
I think the approach to Lieberman and his party should be a lot more nuanced than what I heard in the general discourse, international discourse, and also in this program. I mean, you just heard an Israeli member of parliament calling the international community to impose sanctions on Israel. I think this also demonstrates the strength of the Israeli democracy. The fact that we have a member of parliament, in which other country in the Middle East, say, would you have a member of parliament calling their national community to impose sanctions without being arrested? I mean, obviously there's something very inappropriate in what he does, but he still has the right to do so. Now, after we establish that, Lieberman's party is a lot more nuanced. They're promoting a civic agenda that is a lot more centrist or even center-left than all of the right-wing bloc. It includes alleviation of the conversion issue, civil marriages, stabilizing and initiating electoral reform, issues of national service and equality surrounding this issue, and so on. And in this sense, Lieberman's party's agenda overlaps Kadima's centrist agenda. In some issues, he uses harsh rhetoric that is not implemented into policy. Obviously, we will not accept his rhetoric, and I don't think that he even insists on implementing that, specifically with respect to the issue of loyalty of Israel's Arab citizens to the state. Obviously, there's an issue here. We just got a demonstration, but nevertheless, I disagree with Mr. Lieberman's solution. But to label him Haider and so on would be inappropriate, misleading, and a complete misreading of the more nuanced political scene in Israel.
Now, we've heard a little bit in this program about the idea of negotiation as well. We heard Zalman Javal talking about that. Let me go back to Jamal Zahalka in Nazareth for a perspective there. Where do you think, and I don't know if you can give me an answer to this as such, but where do you think the best chance for negotiation with the Palestinians and a proper two-state solution lies? Does it lie with Tzipi Livni? Does it lie with Benyamin Netanyahu? Does it lie with anyone?
You know, I think that there is a small difference between jumping from the stage 80 or 70. This is the same thing. Maybe the rhetorics of Mrs. Livni is more soft toward the negotiations with Palestinians, but in the end of the day, I don't think that not Netanyahu and not Livni are approaching a real program that can bring balanced and just settlement and solution for the conflict. So in the bottom line, both will give the same results, nothing. This is the Israeli foreign policy now, nothing toward instead of nothing. And so I don't think that there are better one than the other. As I said, both Kadima and Likud and the Labour Party adopted strategy of crisis management. No one means to once or planning for a settlement, just planning for negotiations and empty negotiations. So Netanyahu will agree to negotiations knowing that they will result in anything.
Very interesting discussion,
nothing,
gentlemen,
excuse me.
and so many possibilities, so many personalities, and in the end we just have to wait to hear what Shimon Peres has to say. Thanks to my guests in Tel Aviv, Zalman Cheval and Nazareth Jamal Zahalka, and also in Tel Aviv was Yohanan Pleshner. Thanks for joining us, and thank you to our viewer for joining us for this edition of Inside Story. Your comments, your suggestions, send them to that email address right there. It's insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team, goodbye for now.